I want you to imagine a hypothetical. Imagine we gave a newborn baby $1 trillion and we asked that baby to spend down that money all the way down to zero throughout its lifetime. Now, what we'd have to do is a little bit of calculations here. Let's calculate how many days that child has to live, and then we're going to calculate how much it has to spend on average every day. So, how many days to live? Let's just assume that this child lives for 80 years. So we're going to do 80 times 365.25. You might be wondering where the 0.25 comes from, and that comes from leap years, and that's accounting for those because we care about precision around here. Now, the daily spending, we easily can just take the total amount and divide by the number of days in that child's life. And you can see $34,000 in change. Now, what that means is that child, that baby, would have to spend $34,000 every day for its entire life in order to spend down that sum, $1 trillion. That's like buying this car, a Honda CRV 2026, brand new, every single day throughout its entire life. Can you imagine that? Could you imagine going out and buying a car right now and then doing it again tomorrow and then the next day and then the next day? That's what this person would have to do in order to spend down this money. However, I've actually been lying to you this whole time because that's not $1 trillion. You might notice that's actually just $1 billion. $1 trillion is 1,000 times more than that. So let's go ahead and fix this. Yes, that child, that baby, if given $1 trillion, would have to spend $34 million every day for 80 years in order to spend down $1 trillion. That's an incomprehensible amount to spend each day. In fact, just this one day of spending, that's enough for you to be rich. You'd be filthy rich, right? If you had $34 million, that's what this child would have to spend every single day. Now, we're going to go into how much Elon Musk would have to spend every single day. But to do that, we're going to go over some numbers here because this isn't really accurate, right? Because this assumes no interest, no investments. Well, that's not how money works, really. If you have this sort of money or anywhere close to this sort of money, it's obviously being invested in stuff. So we're going to pick some numbers here. What's the annual interest rate we could use? Well, I'm going to use the risk-free rate. In other words, US Treasury rate. You can see here from this image, this was taken from 6/24/2026. The risk-free rate here is 4.5%. Well, I'm going to use a even smaller amount because you could see that this number fluctuates over time. So I'm going to put it at 4%. Okay, simple enough. Now I need to convert that to annual interest rate compounded daily because we're going to do with daily spending. So that gets converted like that. So this 4% actually becomes 3.92, but again, that's a daily compounded rate. And this is just here to, this number is just here to check my work here. Okay. Now, what's the principle? Well, I could put $1 trillion here because he did reach 1 trillion at one point, but as of right now, as of recording this, his current net worth is estimated to be 951 billion. So I'm just going to use that number. Again, I'm lowballing myself in all of these numbers. So 951. Okay, 951 billion. Now we need to calculate how many days in the life. So how many days is Elon going to live? Let's be generous and say he's going to live to 90. He's currently 54 years old. So that's going to give him 36 more years. So we're going to put equals 36 times 365.25. And that gives us this here. And it gives us this number here. You can see the formula is a little bit complicated, but I'll explain it just briefly. Basically, Elon would have to spend, given these inputs, $135 million every single day for the rest of his life in order to spend down his wealth. Given that he's only earning 4% annual interest, which obviously he's earning much more than that. I made a version of this video back in December, and at that time he was only in the 700 billion area. Now he's in the 950 billion. So that's, if I did the calculation over here, you can see that that's like a 29.76% increase, and that's just from this past December. So obviously he's earning a much higher rate than 4% annually. And I'm lowballing this number as well, and he'd have to spend $135 million each day. You might be wondering, what's this formula here? I'm using this formula here that you can see here on the bottom left. Just replacing I and N with the variables here. Okay. To show you exactly how this plays out, I got an amortization table. Here's a starting balance. Interest is gained based on that interest rate. The daily spending is whatever that daily spending calculation was. And then he gets a new balance. You'll notice that the new balance takes the starting balance, adds in interest, and then subtracts out the daily spending. You can see that the starting balance for the next day is a little bit lower, and it'll continue to get lower as he spends this wealth. If you go all the way down on day 13,149, which is the number of days we calculated that he would have left to live, given that he lives to 90. He might live longer, he might live shorter, but 90 is obviously a generous estimate, since that's higher than the average life expectancy. You can see at the end of those days, his balance is 0, and the total amount he would have to spend would be $1.7 trillion. This is an actually absurd amount of wealth. It's hard to explain how much wealth that is. So I've got some things that Elon could spend his money on. You know, instead of spending that money to help anyone, instead he's, spending hours every single day on Twitter. How many tweets does the man send a day? Like, I saw one estimate is like 60. I don't know how accurate that is, but rest assured he's spending hours a day on Twitter. Okay, yeah, ridiculous. And he has his stupid Grok AI and other bullshit. Let's see, how many homeless kids are there in the US? 1.5 million. Let's say he could buy a reasonable size home for $300,000, meaning with $450 billion, he could house every single homeless kid in the US, and it would be less than half of his wealth. This is the sort of problem he could solve with this sort of insane wealth. Let's go on. Here's the estimated medical debt in the United States, $220 billion. He could easily pay that off with less than 25% of his wealth, causing us all to become debt-free from medical bills. That's another way he could use his wealth. In fact, he could buy both these things and still be a 100 billionaire. He could fund 30 years of UN emergency aid. At least that's according to this website here. So don't quote me on that. He could invest in global carbon capture infrastructure. He could offer scholarships to half of the youths in America. How about cancer research? Why not fund that? How about providing clean water throughout the world? See, these are things that you or I, if we had this sort of wealth, that's what we would be spending on. But Elon, no, because he's such an egotistical asshole, he likes to spend his money on getting more money, more power. And why? Why do you need all that? So that's all I wanted to talk about here, just so you have a reasonable idea of what $1 trillion actually might look like. Still hard to comprehend. Still hard to like wrap your head around like he would have to spend $135 million per day. That's like an impossible number to even wrap your head around. At least it is for me. So anyway, uh, thanks for watching. Do the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you guys next time.